Hello, welcome back everyone. So this one, I want to talk about collectivism and tribalism. As I alluded in the previous video that was addressing the white nationalists, there's a lot of problems that we have in current day society due to collectivism and tribalism. And before I get into how that ties into it, I wanted to just make the argument itself first, and then tell you how exactly the white supremacist people are part of this problem.
So the really big problem that we have here is a failure of understanding. We have a lot of prescribed identities in today's society. When people go to things like their genetic lineage, their ethnicity, their race, I'm sorry to say, but this is not an identity. Religion is not an identity. Your sexual orientation is not an identity. Your gender, while maybe a significant part of your identity, is not in and of itself an identity. Part of the problem with collectivism and tribalism is that it obfuscates the ability of one to be able to individually and independently define their individual identity for themselves. As a result, all across the social landscape, we have these prescribed identities. Your political affiliation is an identity. But when you go to left-leaning or right-leaning YouTubers, far left, far right, they give you a prescribed identity. And you're not allowed to deviate in any way, shape, or form. And there's a real problem with that, because a lot of people don't unilaterally conform to all the ideals, the state of mind, the lifestyle that is required to fit into these categories, these boxes. This sort of uniformity, conformity exists. It's an art form or a something that is lost upon the younger generations, is the ability to define your identity for oneself. And to make matters worse, on top of the collectivism and the tribalism, the people within each collective, tribe, the individuals themselves tend to be very self-centered, self-righteous, aggrandizing, and narcissistic. This gets in the way of a lot of stuff. Like, a good example would be within the left sphere of liberals, leftists, libertines, there is the pro-gun and gun restriction position, both simultaneously existing within that political sphere. The ones who advocate against it are advocating against it with the idea in mind that mass shootings, mass murders, crime rates will go down. Those who are in favor, it's not necessarily about that. It's the idea that taking away a civil right, liberty, or freedom, or violating is not something that should be taken lightly. You would still be punishing every single person that uses guns responsibly on account of all those that have not. And the idea of holding an individual accountable for their individual actions is gone. So then the question comes, why should everyone be punished because of the actions of a few? When we talk about restricting freedoms, you are talking about restricting freedoms. And if your goal, as many say on the left, is to maximize freedoms, well, you're not doing that when you're restricting a freedom. So it really should not be taken lightly. And it also makes you a hypocrite. One of the problems with this tribalist and collectivism, and I think the perfect analogy is the question of, when it comes to life, do you prefer quantity or quality? It doesn't really matter what your answer is. Your answer is yours alone. It's individualist. It's a subjective answer. And when I was talking about individualists and collectivism, I'm not talking about points on the political compass, the four-quadrant political compass. That's not what I'm talking about. When it comes to politics, I would be called a collectivist because I look at society overall as a whole. What I talk about personal identity and individualism, like from an individualist lens, is not political. It's so specific to one's identity. It means that, well, it means a lot of things. But let's go back to this question, quality versus quantity. So what if you could live for 200 years, but by living 200 years, you will live your life in extreme pain and agony, both physically and mentally, and there will be very little, if anything, we can do to curtail that pain, emotional and physical pain. Or you could live only 40 or 60 years, but that 60 years would be pain-free and bliss. What is your answer? Do you even know who you are as an individual, or are you going to give the prescribed answer of the people that prescribe your identity for you? Well, here's the problem. The people who want longevity cannot understand the position of the person who prefers quality. Nor can the person who prefers quality understand the position of the person who prefers quantity. What ends up happening is the person who prefers quantity looks at the person who prefers quality and says, what's wrong with you? Why on earth would you choose to live only 60 years? Yeah, you'll be pain-free and bliss, but you'll be addicted to a drug or something. You must not understand. You don't understand. The person who wants quantity thinks the person who wants quality, they don't know what they're talking about. If only they could step in my shoes. If only I could get them to think how I want them to think. If I could get them to live the quantity instead of the quality, surely they'll understand what I'm talking about. What actually ends up happening is the person who prefers quality ends up being absolutely miserable. And they don't prefer the quantity, even if it's forced on them. Well, it works vice versa. See, the problem is the person who wants quantity cannot understand this. They think you're doing it wrong. What my tribe is doing is the right way. You have to do what my tribe is doing. What your tribe is doing is wrong. It's all wrong. You don't understand. I have to save you from yourself. Because you don't know what you're talking. You think you know, but you don't. You don't know. I have to save you from yourself. I have to show you the way. Well, the person who thinks in terms of quality has the same mindset. I have to show you the way. You don't know what you're talking about. You have to do what my tribe is doing. What your tribe is doing is wrong. What my tribe is doing is correct. Ultimately, you get fractionalization. They become fractions and completely partisan of each other because they can't understand each other. The people who prefer quantity think that they need to get the people who prefer quantity to fall in line with the people who prefer quality, to fall in line with the people who want quantity. And through this is the only way that they can truly understand that that is the right and only way. Through both perspectives, there is no room for subjectivity, personal choice, taste, preference. You just don't understand. The people who want quality, they view the people who want quantity the same way. So one tries to control the other because they think absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt they're in the right. What their tribe is doing is the way to do it. That's what I know. That's what our tribe does. It's so wonderful. It's so perfect. And the only reason you don't know is because your tribe is doing it wrong. And they don't even necessarily see your tribe. They just say, you're doing it wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Thus, we have the problem of collectivism and tribalism. The one thing that neither side can grasp is that each position is not antithetical to the other. Both can exist simultaneously without issue. The people who want quantity can live their 200 years of existence of agonizing pain and suffering emotionally, mentally, and live for 200 years. And that in no way, shape, or form affects the people who are only living 60 years, but pain-free and bliss. Same with the people who want quality. They can live their 60 years of pain-free bliss, and it bears absolutely no impingement upon those who make the decision, the individual choice, taste, preference of saying, I want longevity. They can both exist at the same time. There is no need for those who want quality to impinge on those who want quantity. Maybe only living 60 years is terrifying to them. Maybe living is the important part. Well, it goes the same way for those who want quantity over quality. The people who want quality, they don't want the pain. And that sacrifice of the longevity is worth it to them. And so they are as an impasse. They do not understand each other. And because it's collectivism and tribalism, it's this old tribalistic mentality of, we have to take that tribe over, or that individual over, and we have to convert them to what we're doing, because we're right, and they're wrong. The real reality is, neither one is right nor wrong, because it's not objective. It's subjective. This is what I was saying when I was talking about the white supremacists that did this at the Idaho thing. When I was saying this is that for some reason, they've got it in their mind that LGBT rights is oppression, suppression. It's antithetical to their way of life. Well, maybe antithetical to their way of life, or rather different than theirs. They don't understand the position. They don't understand why you would do this. They don't understand that it's not a choice in that situation. They don't understand why someone, though, would choose to live a different lifestyle. They think, well, the lifestyle that I live, it's doing me well. It's doing me right. It's doing me justice. And if I could just tell them how to think, think how I tell you to think, then they'll understand. But what they don't realize is, well, the people in that situation, they're dead inside. There is no recognition of choice, taste, preference of the individual. Looking at these tribes, these collectives, even I as an individual, I can look at, honestly, with the left, I identify with quite a bit of it. Well, I've always been a libertine, a liberal, a leftist. I've always been. But I've never engaged in this collectivist, tribalist behavior. Never done that. This is a weird thing that's going on. And because people do this, so let's take the left. It's like there's individuals in there with different tastes, choice, preferences. They go through a list of prescribed identity, the prescribed identity, manifesto. And they look at one thing, one aspect, and they say, well, I like this, I like that. They like 98% of it. They come across some things that I don't like this one, I'll put that over there. And in the collectivist, tribalist sense, that's not acceptable. You have to conform. You have to. If you don't, you're no longer part of the collective or the tribe. You're going against it. You have to follow all traditions as they are prescribed to you, as the identity is prescribed to you. Nuance? No. Gone. No nuance. No experience of, but I have a different question that isn't being raised, and I think it's something worth talking about. Nope, you're going against the tribe. You're going against the collective. You can't do that. There's no room for individuality. There's no room for being an original under this collective state of mind. There's no room to say, to be pro LGBTQIA plus rights, but then turn around and go, well, what about these other aspects? There's a sort of sense of irony in it all. A trans woman, for example, came out and said, as a trans woman, I recognize that biologically, I was born male. YouTuber Xanderhall calls that person a traitor and a neo-Nazi. There's something ultimately ironic about that. Trans woman is saying, I identify as a woman. I'm a woman. But I can also understand, biologically, I'm a male. And it's just the pure definition of irony for a heterosexual, cis male to point the finger at them and say, you're the enemy, you're a problem. And the reality is they probably agree on things more often than they don't. The big irony to me, a cis, heterosexual guy is trying to tell a trans woman what opinions she can and cannot have. And unfortunately, it's not even an opinion. It's fact. Maybe to that tribe it's an uncomfortable truth, but it's truth nonetheless. But that's collective. It's tribal. You can't have a differing opinion from the collective. You have a differing opinion from the tribe. You can't state facts that our tribe, our collective doesn't like. You can't do that. We've given you this prescribed identity. And you have to take it. If you don't take it, well, then you're not part of this identity. And the identity here isn't trans. It's ideological. So again, we have two different positions. In this case, the person who's part of the tribe, the collective, cannot understand the position of this other person and thinks, well, I have to tell you how to think, because if I don't tell you how to, if you don't think how I tell you to think, then you're doing it wrong. And something's wrong. You're not doing it right. We're having a lot of problems with this in society, with the left and the right. Collectivism, tribalism, the negation of individual and individual's identity, of self-expression, of self-identities, making one's own decisions on how and who they want to identify as an individual. And as a result, you end up with a lot of moral busybodies that have this mentality of, well, I have to save you from yourself. You don't know what's good for you. I do. All the while, they don't recognize these differences and uncomfortable truths, or the very problematic negation of perspective, of subjectivity, of personal choice, taste, and preference. You have a lot of people in society that don't like the idea of drug use, for example. They want things like benzodiazepines to no longer be prescribed for people with generalized panic and anxiety disorder. The argument given is, well, a company shouldn't profit off of addiction. While I agree with that sentiment, I don't think deliberately profiting off of addiction is ethical or moral. But what they're not seeing here, it's like they're only looking at a very narrow perspective. They're only looking at the people who abuse this drug for recreational purposes. And they completely ignore the people who benefit from this drug. People with panic and anxiety disorder. Someone, let's say, who went from having 5 panic attacks a day, and benzodiazepines have changed their life around. They no longer have 5 panic attacks a day. But these people come in and who say, well, we shouldn't profit off because benzodiazepines are addictive. A person with panic and anxiety disorder, they don't get intoxicated by benzodiazepines. It just stops their panic attack and slows down their anxiety. I would even argue that the people who are taking them for fun, well, I don't think you know what it's like to be in their position. Maybe they're taking them for fun because it's alleviating sort of an existential crisis they have within themselves towards society itself. And so the people who benefit off of this medication get pulled off of it. And so do the people who just want to take it for the fuck of it. And the people who are responsible for that do not understand what they've done. And what they fail to realize, you have hope. You can provide this drug for those that want and need it. And if you personally have some kind of apprehension against that drug, well, you don't have to. You don't have to. They're not antithetical to each other. It's not like they can't both simultaneously exist. They can. It's not an impingement upon each other for both to exist simultaneously. The collectivist tribalist mentality says that it does. Because when you're in collective, when you're in tribalism, it's very much think how you're told to think, uniformity, conformity. And it's almost like people have completely forgotten the definition of fascism. That is pretty much what the definition is. Like, it's like some sort of ultimate uniformity, conformity. It's conformity. And thus the individual's choices, tastes, preferences are now undermined. Because the collective that has a prescribed way of life, a prescribed identity, well, their doctrine says, you can't do that. This is the best way to live your life. They don't know any better. I think the biggest bullshit pusher of this is religion. The three Abrahamic religions prescribe your identity. They prescribe what goes on in your head, how you're supposed to think, how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to feel, all the way down to don't eat fish on Friday. It's a way of life. It's a state of mind. It tells you pretty much what you're supposed to do in almost every aspect and every way. It is a collectivist. It is tribalist. And anyone who doesn't follow the dogma, they don't know what they're doing. They're hurting themselves. We have to help them. We have to save them. Their tribe is doing it wrong. We have to absorb their tribe and teach them our ways, because our ways are correct. Well, meanwhile, the other tribe that they're saying this to thinks the exact same thing. Neither one understand. They can both exist without telling each other what to do. That was sort of a message to the white nationalists, one of them, the white supremacist people, is that multiculturalism, multi-ethnicity, LGBTQIA+ rights, liberties, freedoms, is not preventing them from living the prescribed identity they want to live, the puritanical lifestyle. Raising a child between a man and a woman. Not having sex until married, no sex out of wedlock. No adultery. No blasphemy. It's like the one thing that's escaped the ability of people today, is the ability to say, to look at another person and what they're doing and say, ew, that's gross, I don't like it. And then leave it at that. By the way, if you're making moral and ethical judgments based on what you find to be gross, you're making a bad argument. Really bad argument. So right now, in the United States, in a lot of Western civilizations actually, because of this collectivist and tribalist crap that's going on, we have big problems. They've taken away pain medication from chronic pain patients. This absolutely has to do with collectivism and tribalism. Because, a company shouldn't profit off of addiction. And the people who greatly benefit from this medication are ignored. And the people who are being ignored are the people who know that maybe their life will be cut short, but it's not about the longevity, it's about quality of life. It's about not living every minute of every hour of every day in pain. And if you want to do that, that's fine. Do it. No one's stopping you. No one said you had to take pain meds. But why take it away from the people who do? What is the purpose of this? They don't know. They don't understand. They don't know any better. We have to save them from themselves. And what ends up happening is they end up suffering for it. People need to get out of this state of mind of collectivism and tribalism and realize that just because somebody does something that you don't like or find offensive or abhorrent, degenerative, whatever the word is you want to use, realize you don't have to do what they're doing. You can continue doing what you're doing, and they can continue doing what they're doing. The only thing that's stopping either one is when one collective tries to say, no, you don't understand. If I force you to do my thing, then you will. And that's never the case. Yeah. We have bills, legislation, we have violations of civil rights, liberties, and freedoms that are taking place because of a clash of collectivist tribalists and the advocation of individuality, of individual choice, taste, preference, and one's ability to decide for themselves what their identity is instead of having an identity prescribed to them. You don't need an identity prescribed to you. You should know what you like, what you don't like, what your tastes, choices, and preferences are. You should know that. If you don't know that about yourself, and you're only saying, I like X because my tribe told me to, I think you need to get out of that collective. I think you need to get out of that tribe. Because if you don't actually like X, You're not being yourself. You're lying to yourself, and you're undermining who you are. I can't eat broccoli and pretend to like it. I'm not even going to try. And every time I eat broccoli, I gag until I throw up. That's just a part of who I am, but I don't want to take broccoli away from everyone else that does enjoy it. It's pretty healthy, actually. But if you were to force me to, because your collective says so, because I just don't know any better, I don't know what I'm talking about, it's going to cause me a lot of pain because I'm going to gag and throw up a lot. I don't know why, but that's just what happens when I eat broccoli. Now apply that on so many things that are occurring in society today, especially when it comes to between the left and the right. I don't like the concept that everyone who is on the right, some leftists take this position that everyone who's right-leaning automatically neo-Nazi, Nazi, fascist, white supremacist. And that's not true. It's not true. There are lots of libertarians that don't like those ideas. They tend to be very right-leaning economically. But they're usually really, really, really big on freedom. Really big on freedom. And I don't think you could pay them money. I don't think there's enough money you can pay them to throw away rights, liberties, and freedoms for fascism. I don't think so. The conflation of capitalism to fascism is incorrect as well. The conflation of Marxism and anti-capitalism is incorrect as well. The truth of the matter is, capitalism is not a system of government. Communists and fascists both use capitalism. They use it in different ways. Communists and fascists both use socialism. They use it in different ways. What they don't use is democracy. They don't have is a constitutional republic. And if you think that granting, to stop taking away, violating civil rights, liberties, and freedoms because your tribe thinks that this is the best way, if you think that somehow there's a violation of your civil rights, if you think that you're not free, how are you not free in this country? What is this country doing? This constitutional republic. Now, granted, there are freedoms that we don't have that I would like to see, like the end of prohibition. I would like to see the end. I would like to see all drugs legal and regulated and controlled by the FDA for safety for human consumption. I'd like to see that, regardless if they're addictive or not. It's irrelevant. It's about giving people the quality of life that they're asking for. Most of those, like people who smoke cigarettes, when you tell them, oh, you know that's bad for you. Of course they know it's bad for them. They don't care. That should tell you something. I knew a man who, a friend of my dad, he smoked a carton of cigarettes a day. Heavy smoker. I mean, this guy always had a cigarette in his mouth. His diet was cigarettes and coffee. He got diagnosed with cancer, he didn't throw a fit about it, he didn't whine, cry, he didn't go, oh, cigarettes, this, that. No. On the day of his death, a couple hours before he died, his last request was that he wanted to go and have a cigarette. And the doctor said no. Why? He's already dying. That one last cigarette wasn't going to do any more harm than has already been done. He accepted his fate. He enjoyed cigarettes, and that was just the last thing he wanted. He didn't want an extravagant meal. He didn't want to get laid. The last thing he wanted before he started partying, it's the end of her consciousness before he died. Because he wanted a cigarette and he was denied this. Were you worried about addiction? He's already dying. What's going on here? Well, there was a tribe, collectivist, tribalist nonsense, that had this sort of self-entitlement where they said, I have the right to go somewhere and not have to smell your cigarettes. And there was this huge ban, smoking ban across the nation over self-entitlement. Tribalism and collectivism creates fraction. Not being able to understand a person on an individual level creates fraction. It also produces oppression, suppression, and pain. That's all I have to say. Like, share, subscribe, comment, bell button, and there should be some music in this video. Just want you to know, again, this is music. With that, try to break the shackles of collectivism and tribalism. Try to break it. Stop looking at inside the pale, inside the box. Start looking beyond the pale. Start trying to push the envelope. And please, be honest and true to yourself. Accept yourself for who you are. Be you trans, be you homosexual, be you puritanical Christian. Don't lie to yourself and accept a prescribed personality, especially when there's so many aspects about it that you don't even fit and care about, and aspects that even cause you pain. Deny you pleasure, deny you quality, deny you relief of pain.